Welcome back to Anything You Want, the corner of the web where we listen for the quiet confessions underneath the dazzle. If you treasure stories that reveal the tender mechanics of love and patience, stay with us, subscribe to the channel, consider tapping that join button to support more intimate reporting, and if this piece lingers with you, leave a comment below. Now, lean in. This is a delicate chronicle of restraint, design, and an affection that refused to die. A long silence had settled between Afra Saraçoğlu and Mert Ramazan Demir, not a casual gap but a hush that everyone felt and few could decode. They had once been cast as the living embodiment of a romantic ideal, two performers whose chemistry spilled from screen to street, whose smiles ignited fan accounts and late-night conversations. Then, almost imperceptibly, they withdrew. Where tabloids searched for scandal, Afra cultivated stillness. Where the public demanded noise, she answered with absence. But that absence was not surrender. It was a carefully shaped posture with intention behind its calm. When the relationship frayed, Afra did not perform grief, she reorganized herself. She retreated to work she loved, to rehearsals, to scripts that asked something different of her. She declined the hollow rituals of spectacle, no tearful interviews, no flippant posts designed to bait clicks. Instead, she built a new rhythm, one that allowed her to be seen anew, not as a casualty of romance but as an artist regaining her voice. Each public appearance, each choice of outfit, each poised smile became a line in an unwritten letter sent toward one person. It was not revenge she sought. It was reintroduction. She understood that in a world that applauds the loudest performer, a softer, deliberate strategy can be revolutionary: withdraw to recompose, re-enter to remind. What followed was less about provocation than about reawakening memory. Her quiet, composed presence began to make headlines precisely because it felt like a return to the essential, the inward strength that once drew attention not for spectacle but for substance. That return found its first staged-seeming moment one glittering evening at a charity gala in Istanbul. The event, in itself routine for public figures, became an axis when both found themselves in the same room. Afra arrived in satin white, not to stage a spectacle but to tilt the world by her calm. She didn't cross the room in dramatic pursuit, she allowed one look, measured and true, to do what declarations could not. Mert felt that look as if it were gravity, small, in appearance, but sufficient to pull a long-suspended past back into orbit. Friends who watched him in the weeks after the gala described a man unnerved by memory. He lingered on songs they had once exchanged. He thumbed old pictures with a curious tenderness. His attention seemed to slip toward recollections he'd thought resolved. Afra did not chase him with messages or public pleas. Instead, she planted reminders like breadcrumbs across the days. An old song lyric posted with no fanfare on an anniversary, a photograph posted without caption that carried 1,000 private associations, the faint trace of a perfume chosen not to provoke but to awaken. These were not traps but soft invitations, an emotional cartography laid out in small gestures meant to coax memory rather than coerce choice. Weeks later, fate, or perhaps a string of choices quietly arranged, put them on the same film set. What the cameras observed as chemistry was the residue of a relationship that had never been allowed to cool completely. Workaday moments became charged, a hand offered to steady a costume, a shared laugh between scenes, pauses that asked nothing but received everything. In that measured proximity, the old rhythm returned not as a contrivance but as a consequence. Afra did not manufacture it with theatrics. She simply embodied an authenticity that reminded Mert of the woman he had once loved. The transformation was neither dramatic nor immediate. It was incremental and tender. Their encounters moved from accidental crossings in hallways to planned coffees, then to dinners held in quiet corners where cameras could not reach. They returned to a cafe where the light fell always the same way, where the chair by the window held their earlier silence. There, away from flashes and headlines, conversation hardened into confession, not the showboating of regret but the painstaking language of repair. Afra's plan had not depended on spectacle, it depended on time and the soft architecture of trust. When the public caught wind of their rapprochement, the narrative rushed and eager to pin a scandalous label on what had been, in truth, a patient reunion. Photographs offered fragments, an arm resting on a back, a conspiratorial smile, the luminous stillness of two people who had reclaimed one another. But the real work, the awkward conversations, the forgiveness that still had edges, the slow mutual learning of new boundaries, occurred where photos could not trespass. It was a private reconciliation, constructed from humility and the stubborn will to heal. To call what Afra did manipulation flattens the tenderness of her method. She did not engineer humiliation or control, she cultivated remembrance. She invited Mert's attention without forcing it, and she risked being seen as she was rather than as the public wanted her to be. That courage, quiet and exacting, required a certain moral audacity, the willingness to put faith in slow, dignified processes instead of the more immediate gratifications of spectacle. What she won, in the end, was not merely his return. It was a restoration of agency, for herself, for the relationship, and for the story they would tell together thereafter. Mert's response was not explosive. It was reflective, a series of small acknowledgments that accumulated until they resembled a decision. He came not because he was conquered but because he recognized, through absentia and presence, the dignity of someone who had refused to surrender the possibility of love. They did not stage a grand reconciliation. The image that seems to matter most is simple: 2 cups on a small table in a cold cafe, steam rising, the street wet with recent rain. No microphones. No cameras. Just the private ceremony of 2 people who decided, in the stillness of ordinary morning, to begin again. They toasted not the past nor a promised future but the quiet miracle of having found their way back to one another after being lost. Across the industry, opinions vary. Some will always prefer a story with fireworks, others will admire the slow craftsmanship of repair. We share this tale not to prescribe a method but to hold up a human example, that love can be rebuilt through patience, through presence, and through the courage to wait without spectacle. Afra's choice was a lesson in dignity. Silence can be an instrument if it is wielded with tenderness rather than cruelty. Now, as they step into public life together with a cautious tenderness, their gestures are measured and sincere. A shared laugh, the briefness of a touch, the way they move through rooms as if protecting a fragile understanding, these are the small, daily signs that speak louder than any headline. Their story refuses simple categorization. It does not belong wholly to the tabloid or to the romantic myth, but to something more complicated and, therefore, more truthful. We want to hear from you. Have you ever witnessed a reconciliation that unfolded more by silence than by words? Would you call Afra's method bravery or strategy? Or are the two inseparable in love? Share your thoughts and memories below. Tell us which Turkish star you'd like us to explore next in this same careful, humane way, a portrait that values dignity over sensation. If this piece moved you, support Anything You Want by subscribing, leaving a like, and tapping join to help us continue telling the subtle human stories the world often overlooks. Your comments and engagement shape the next chapters we cover.